Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning? Here's what you missed.
Folks, in case you're just joining us, or in case you're waking up today, there is no Maandamano.
Which means get up and go to work. There's no excuse today.
Yeah, because a lot happened that needs to be discussed, and let's find out who was right, who was wrong, who was in the know, and who should have done what.
And also getting into the future, how things can be done, will be done, should be done.
Absolutely. Joining us live in the studios now, two gentlemen who know what they're talking about, folks. Without fear or favor, they just call it like they see it. Abdullahi Alas is a columnist of governance and policy analyst, and John Waiganjo is a commissioner with IPOA. Gentlemen, welcome to Hot 96. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good morning to the viewers.
Oh, you must be very happy that there's no Maandamano today, huh?
Yes, I am.
Happily, I mean, it took a while, huh? Abdullahi, it took a while, but, sanity prevailed in the end.
Yeah, I think if you travel through Nairobi today, you will know that the madness has stopped because Kenyans have resumed their lives and they're going about their life. And we said last week it's going to not take more than a month. We have stakeholders in this country. Kenyans, we live in the country, but in the geopolitics, we say they are big boys. I remember the guy who did the handshake was here. He was here even when Uhuru was still in State House. He visited the president-elect then. I'm sure he was delivering a message that we do not want to go back to 2007. So you guys must iron out whatever you want to do through the legal framework. But I think the whole demonstration was not about food crisis or cost of food, because if it was, then what will happen to ugali today or sukari? Has it gone down? I mean, Raila and Ruto have agreed to talk, then what has happened? So it was about politicians, and as I told you when we were off air, every time the political class have problems, Kenya has a problem. And the problem is not about us, it's about them in power, it's about them sharing the big cake, it's about them employing their cousins and wives and daughters in different places, in cronies in government, using the taxpayers' money. So it was not good for Kenya. I mean, when the president was in Germany, in Brussels, Belgium, and then you watch Al Jazeera or Channel 4 News or, online media, and then you saw those kind of things, then it doesn't, build confidence with the investors. It doesn't depict the country. The president cannot purport to go and fetch for investment when his own house was at fire. So coming back, talking to the U.S. senator from Delaware, and then other discussions, and we were told that yesterday both of them did not go to church. I'm sure they were held somewhere. The media was, I think, caught off guard to some extent because the president was saying, I was waiting for you for an hour. So which means it was kept in a very tight shield, and no one had known a lot of things happening. But it is good for Kenya. President Ruto should worry about inflation. Inflation means there is high demand and less supply. Kenyans are suffering. They have rains have come now. It's time to walk the talk of making sure that fertilizers now reach the farmers. It has rained. We're no longer talking about drought. So, bipartisan through Parliament is going to be an interesting watch, how it's going to be maneuvered. Remember, there is already a written memo by the former chair of IEBC, or Issa Kassan, talking about the intrigues. And the problem is when most of these political processes are affected, or rather decision makers become politicians, then we will be having the cycle of either violence or demonstrations every 5 years. So we need to have institutions that are very independent from the political class.
Absolutely. John Waiganjo, look, the opposition has said that they're putting this Maandamano on hold. They're giving it 1 week. But let's face it, the last 2 weeks were really, really, we haven't seen anything like this before.
Yeah, it was terrible. We monitored the demonstrations on the 20th as a first, and they were not as bad as the 27th. We counted more than 10 fatalities. We have countless serious injuries, including those of police officers. We have about 7 cases of police inaction. And we quite relieved that this is over, because at least we will be able to sit and publicize our report and also get some little time to go through the cases that we already have. You saw the brutality that the police used on journalists. We have visual images. We're trying to get to the bottom of the issues to know how many officers were involved in the fatalities. We have their details. So our investigations will begin in earnest. We are also looking at command responsibility. We want to know which commanders were where during those Maandamanos, at least the 4 hotspots, Nairobi, Kakamega, Migori, and Kisumu. Those are our concentration areas, and therefore the public should expect shortly that IPOA will be releasing some information on the cases that we are following up.
But John, when you see a police officer shooting, you can see the images. They're shooting directly into the journalist's vehicle. I mean, what's going to happen to them?
No, first of all, that's our suspect. The officer we are talking about.
Has he been suspended? Has he been...
Not yet. He hasn't been suspended yet. What we have done, we have moved on our own motion. Because we haven't got complaints as such. So we are compiling our files, including taking statements from those journalists and analyzing those visual images for purposes of making recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution so that now he can prosecute those officers. So it's work in progress. And I want to say here that IPOA is an independent agency. It's an independent authority. It's a government authority, independent, funded by taxpayers, and we do not take our instructions from anyone. And when the president says that the Inspector General of Police is an independent office also, on behalf of the members of the National Police Service, and that he has already given the exchequer directions that the IG has his own funding away from the office of the president. So what we are being told is that each institution like that one of the Inspector General of Police is independent, should carry out their mandate independently and lawfully. So when I talk about command responsibility, we are starting from the Inspector General himself down to the corporals. And we want to know, for instance, those instances where public property was invaded and no investigations have been commenced. We haven't seen any arrests, even after images have already been projected of the people who made such raids. People who burned the church and the mosque in Kibera, they are known. They are the same people. The people who burned the church are the same ones who burned the mosque. So we want police to do their work. We understand that the police have also their challenges, but we are telling the Inspector General of Police to take his work seriously. This is not the time to go and say that the demos are illegal. He has no such mandate. That mandate is with the courts. His responsibility is to guard the people of Kenya, their lives and their properties, and to make sure that the members of the National Police Service are well taken care of, their welfare is looked after, they are given the right tools, even as they go for demos. Because, for instance, in all those demos, did you see an ambulance somewhere? No. And you know the law requires that if an officer injures a demonstrator, it is the responsibility of that officer to give that demonstrator some first aid, then report to his senior, then the senior to report to us. I saw some very disturbing reports yesterday where the police were saying that they will no longer be using their signals, open files to pass information, and that they would be using an alternative channel, emails, so that only a few officers would have access to such information. That is illegal. And therefore, that's why I'm saying we as an authority are very relieved that this is over now, so that we can soberly go through all the reports and see who we are taking to court, because certainly we will be making recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to take charge and take some fellows to court. We won't see some people taking plea.
You've said there's images of the people who burned down the churches, looted. But see, when people are looting, so many people. And and how we collect evidence in Kenya, some things that can't even be presented as evidence, like CCTV footage and all those things to convict someone.
For instance, even the invasion at Northlands, we are not looking at who are the thieves, who are the planners, who went in to loot. We are only looking at why didn't the police said the police to guard the property.
Yes.
Or why are they not carrying out investigations to charge? You see, so we are looking at the conduct of the police ourselves. As for the looters, the thieves, the invaders, that's the work of the DCI. But if the DCI does not act there, then therefore, that's where we come in, just to look at the conduct of the police officer, because our mandate is quite restricted. It is the professionalization of the members of the National Police Service, and we cannot go beyond that. Beyond that is the work of the members of the National Police Service.
So we'll never know.
No, someone has to report first how our criminal justice work. They should be a complainant. So the guys who own those properties have to have an OB recorded statement. They can identify people in the CCTV. The CCTV can come in handy if it is in the supermarket, and I know the people who came, and I can say this guy came, this guy came, this guy came. But for somebody to be charged in a court of law in Kenya, there must be a complainant.
Yeah.
Then from there must be an OB. Then from there the file will be taken for investigations with the police. They investigate and then hand over evidence or whatever they investigated to the DCI. Then if the threshold is met, and let me now tell you what happens in Kenya. 98 or 97% of criminal cases will collapse. Why? Corruption is very rife in the country. Files will disappear. Evidence will disappear. Tampering of evidence, because people are paid to do things in this country. This is a country where you can die because of 10,000. Someone can be given 10,000 to kill you. So if you look at even what the National Police has reported, the crime rate in the country. So the looters and the people who go to private places, they must be a complainant. Unless the state will become a complainant. Then for a state to become a complainant in a private property, then how will that augur well in court?
No, the state is always a complainant
yes,
in all criminal matters.
Yes, so if it does complain now as the state, and they gather the evidence and investigation are handled well, and the people are identified, then that can stand in a court of law. But now, what does that say about our culture in the country? What does that say about the lack of unemployment or underemployment in the country? Why is it that Jeff, Nick, Abdullahi and the commissioner here are not stealing? Why are they not throwing stones? Why is it that those young men are throwing stones? There is lack of inequity in this country, okay? The haves and the have-nots. I was reading Weep Not Child by Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, and what, the things that ailing us is known. But what has happened is the political class, the guys who were speaking yesterday, have taken the narrative away in the sense that the discussion of food security in this country does not feature anywhere in every policy the government does. Now, when you implement a policy and the policy is funded, and all it takes is how to make money, and the big guys are comfortable, where does that leave? I mean, if it's true that I was reading research in central Kenya, part of Coast and Nyanza and Western, and part of Eastern, you will say that central Kenya has produced 3 presidents, okay? They have produced almost 2 deputy presidents, Jomo and Kibaki and some other guy, 2 other guys. Now, what is the poverty level in central Kenya? It is very high. So it's not true that if one of your own is the president, poverty level will go down. What is the mortality rate in Nyanza? What is the mortality rate of what is the AIDS indicators or numbers in Nyanza? So the discussion, as we say, like this one of the IEBC thing, if it's parliament and politicians that are going to reach decisions, then everything we are discussing will still come back in 2027, 2032, when my son is my age, he comes here and discusses with those who will live here. I mean, what are we discussing? We are discussing what Kenyatta spoke about in independence. So Kenyans must realize that it is not, a value for our money for us to be divided along ethnic. It doesn't matter who you belong to in this country. We are strangers. 50 million of us live with each other. Why is it that the ordinary Kenyan has no problem with each other, and every time political class are fighting, we are the ones, who suffer? So the discussion, even in the media, should be, where is the role of the Kenyan citizen in every discussion, in every politics? Unless and when we do that, everything else will just be political class taking away the narrative, running away with it. Then we are told that we are going to have a bipartisan political approach in Parliament. We are going to resolve the issue of IEBC. How many commissioners are going to be employed by IEBC? 7. Then what happens to the 22 million Kenyans who cannot afford 2 meals?
But the Kenyan public had an opportunity to do that 7 months ago, and they are the people who put the people in office where they are today. So let the conversation start where it ought to start, not with the leaders. The leaders come after the elections. So the elections happens, and we have a democracy where everybody goes to vote.
So you're saying the problem is?
The problem is with the public. The leaders are just a reflection of the public. Yeah. So that's the fact. When you are bribed to vote, When corruption starts at the voting point and then people take 200 bob and then they go and vote in the wrong guy. And then they start crying and saying, political class. Political class where and you started it. So, in fact, it's the Kenyans themselves. The problem starts with the voter himself. Otherwise, the guys who you put in office, they are not there. I mean, they didn't seize power. They are there democratically. They were elected by the Kenyan public. So as for issue of governance and when they take office, those are ethics. It's nothing more. And you can't change them. If you vote in a useless governor, don't expect to change that governor because he's gone for a governance course. That guy is useless from the core. And you will have to stay with him for the next 5 years before you go back to the ballot again, get bribed, and then vote him back again. So it's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And I can't pretend personally that the people who are leaders today are doing a disservice to the public. They are not. They are just exercising their duties and the powers that have been donated to them by the public the best way that they know. So even as we try to blame the political class, let us remember we are the ones who put them there in the first instance. Yeah. But on the issues of the IEBC, for instance, the constitution of the IEBC and the selection of the panel that is going to interview the commissioners who will be employed, that's a valid point. Because you look at it and you know, if the selection panel then is biased, then it means the commissioners who come into office will now also conduct the 2027 elections in the long way. So that's a conversation we can have, and I think that's why it came up immediately. And I believe this bipartisan committee that will be formed, that will be their starting point, because that is possible. Those are things they can do. They can alter the reasoning behind the selection panel and its composition, and now come up with an agreeable one by both sides, the Azimio and the ruling coalition. But if we go back to open the servers, you are not legitimately elected, then we'll be at the same place. We won't move. The cost of living, that's a good conversation we can have right there. Right to food, and you know, and all those are devolved functions. It's the governors who should be at the forefront. The right to food, the right to water, the right to health. All those, agriculture, that's a devolved function. So even as we talk to the national government, we know that all the economic, social justice are all at the level of the counties, and it's the governors who should take charge.
The system generated to have Kenyans is not the one to liberate and empower them. No. It's a conditioned poverty created by a system of governance, a model theory we borrowed. So our problem is leaders that are not authentic, honest, truthful, or trustworthy.
The 2010 Constitution came and liberated this country, unless people do not want to be liberated. It is the most progressive constitution that we have in this continent. It gives us the public participation space to do public participation. It devolved power from the center to the counties and down still to the wards, so that the fellow you are living with, you are seeing every day there, is a lawmaker who is going to the county assembly every morning to make laws, to make sure you have food, to make sure you have fertilizer, to make sure you have market for your milk, to make sure your loads are done. And every 5 years, you have an opportunity to go and change them or vote another person. So civic education is entrenched in that constitution.
Yeah, but Waiganjo, yes, that never happens. That never happens.
It depends on the budget, Jeff.
Or the amount of bribes that are given out.
And what's being looted also. Because some of these counties, they will say we are going to build a stadium worth 300 million.
And where's that stadium?
And instead of, people have cows, you don't have a slaughterhouse, you don't have
road.
Water,
we have institutions to deal with that. We have the EACC to deal with the thieving governors. Isn't it? We have the DCI to deal with ordinary thieves.
Why do we have to wait for DCI? How many people have looted money in this country and gone to jail compared to the people who steal, let's say, something from the shop because they have to feed their family?
Where there is poverty, where services are not given to the people, where the government is very focused on either looting among themselves or giving bits and bytes to Kenyans. What has happened to Kenya from 1963 is the rights of the people were given in bits and bytes. 60 years, people are dying for hunger in North Rift. 6 years after independence, the military and police are fighting people in Turkana, Baringo, Kapedo, and Suguta Valley. I have been there. So the problem is cultural institutionally led elite system that has, because if you look at the models of making policies, the best is the one for institutions. Now let's say Raila and Ruto leave the country and the government take a break for 2 weeks. Is this station going to be closed? Supermarket will not be closed. Transport system will. So when people are empowered, they are the ones who do the most effective work in a country. It's not the political class. There are not more than 1,000 or 2,000 of them. All of them, if you add plus the MPs and the governors. MCAs are 1,400 something. I studied governance in school, and I made it my responsibility to research on it compared to other countries. Kenya is richer than 6-7 countries of our neighbors combined in terms of GDP. But it's cheaper to live in Tanzania and Uganda than in Kenya. I lived in Busia, Uganda when I was going to a Jamii primary school in Busia. It is cheaper to live in Busia, Uganda than in Busia, Kenya. Yet these are two countries and their GDP is not compared to us. So the policies that we drive, they're all written in paper, yes. But how effective? We only develop good policies, we only implement 20%.
So after this truce, what do we expect? Are we expecting a handshake? Are we expecting, life to go back to normal? Or in a week's time, will there be Maandamano?
Well, I see an opening to dialogue. The hard stands are done with, and I think the country is normal. Even this morning, as you can see, people are now in their offices, they are working. We want to see the bipartisan committee that will be formed. I imagine it will be formed from both sides of the house. I don't see any further standoffs. Because I don't see anybody lineaging with what happened yesterday. But when you open it up to Parliament, ultimately, when that report is ready, the report then should be given to the President and the Prime Minister, and they will not be given separately. So finally, you'll see a handshake. A handshake is a handshake in whichever way you look at it. I'm shaking your hand, It doesn't mean that there is power passing through the handshake.
It's just that we've agreed with each other.
And we have met, if I meet you, Nick, today, the first thing I met Jeff is we shook hands.
Yeah.
So that's the handshake we will see.